Hey, it's Armin with Attract. At Attract Advisors, we offer accounting advisory, tax advisory, as well as financial management services. We're lucky enough to work with very many hardworking, talented entrepreneurs across many different industries. Many of these individuals are world-class in their sphere and have great stories to tell. This is our way of highlighting their accomplishments and their insights, and we hope you enjoy these conversations.
Welcome back, everybody, to our next episode of Kickin Assets. Today, we're joined by my dear friend and fellow entrepreneur, dad, husband, Nick Miller. Nick is the owner of Build Commercial Construction, based right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and is actually one of Attract's first clients. So I'm excited to jump into Nick's story today, where we're at and where we're going. So, Nick, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Been checking out your podcast for a while, so excited to be a guest.
Excellent. So let's start early on, Nick. You know, I understand. I know you're from Baton Rouge. Kind of always come up through here. I know there was a point in your career where you kind of left and came back. But let's start like Nick as a child. You know, your spouse. I mean, I'm sorry.
I didn't have a spouse as a child. Yeah.
Let's start with Nick as a child, where with your siblings and your parents, and you know, early signs of entrepreneurship. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, born and raised in Baton Rouge. My parents are both Baton Rouge locals as well. I have two siblings, older brother, younger sister. We are very much a tight-knit family. A lot of entrepreneurs in the family. Super close. I was super close growing up with my late grandfather, my mom's dad, who was an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, always had a business, always had real estate going, had a little bit of everything going on. And in his, quote unquote retirement, he would do a lot of historic restoration, a lot of construction, a lot of renovating. And then towards the later years, whenever he was, physically not able to, stand on roof rafters and swing a hammer anymore, he even did custom trim work and furniture repairs, and he was a master carpenter, so he kind of had his hands in all that. My parents are also entrepreneurs. My various aunts and uncles are entrepreneurs. Kind of always surrounded by it. So it's something that's been a constant conversation since we were kids. It's just something I've always been around.
And so as a kid coming up in Baton Rouge, like what were, I guess, some of the early activities or sports that you were able to kind of get through and learn like some valuable life lessons as a kid?
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying that I'm not very good at sports. I still play golf, and a few years back took up tennis. But as a kid, I did the standard football, basketball, baseball circuit. But in our family, we're actually more music focused. So I was in the band growing up, and I still play tenor saxophone, which I don't play very well anymore because I don't practice it every day or even very often. But a lot of those life lessons, you can point back to. The band would be a good example. I mean, golf is probably far more relatable to a lot of people. It's like, you can put in a lot of effort and still kind of stink at it.
Yeah.
And you play a lot against yourself. It's very similar in music. If you stand up and have to solo in front of a giant crowd of people and you flub it, it's kind of on you.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of other outside circumstances that can really influence whether or not you can show up and be as prepared as you need to be or have the skill set you need to have to perform and do what you need to do. So it kind of goes back to being over-prepared, being laser-focused, and being prepared to execute in a pressure situation.
Yeah, and putting the time in, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and building time in your schedule to, go above and beyond and to do everything that you can to, always do your best.
Absolutely. I think, and to kind of further on that is one super, super critical thing that I would take away from it, and I don't guess I really connected those dots until now, is you kind of have to have your own style. Nobody talks about a new artist or whatever that's a singer and says like, man, I really love this artist, but only because they sound exactly like this other artist, right? And you have to take the same approach with business. You have to take the same approach with sales, with dealing with your team. Like you got to make it your own. It can't be robotic and it can't be copy and paste, right? You have to have your own style, your own way of doing things. And if you try and be a robot, it's just not genuine, you know, and people will sniff that out in a hurry. So like being yourself, developing your own style, utilizing what you've learned and making it your own is such a critical aspect of any kind of management or entrepreneurship. Right?
So I know that, you mentioned your grandfather, and if it's the same one that I'm thinking of as it relates to, a board that we serve on the community outreach side, I know that he's someone who was very important to you. As a kid, did you learn how to use tools and whatnot from him? Like, would he kind of take you out and train you, like how to work with your hands and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I spent a lot of time, summers, weekends with them, with that set of grandparents. He had a shop on Government Street, directly across from Electric Depot. Now it's Cajun Electric.
Yeah.
And that was where we tinkered. Whether it was, working on, he always had antique cars, and whether it was tinkering with an antique car or, a lot of the stuff I remember is laying out 40 antique salvaged windows, and today we're going to reglaze windows, or today we're going to turn a custom piece of molding or build a door. And I wouldn't say I'm ashamed, but like I look back and I wish I would have realized how valuable paying attention to all that was.
Yeah, life lessons, huh?
Oh my goodness. Well, just from the skill set perspective, funny enough, my wife and I, our first house was in the Garden District. It was built in 1918, and it had all the historical elements still in that house. And I remember the first time something happened where it was like, hey, this custom piece of trim did this, and now the door fell off, and how do we fix this and make it match? And I was like, I am now realizing, because my grandfather had passed away somewhere right in there, and he battled Alzheimer's leading up to that point, so he wouldn't have been able to help before he passed away anyway. But I kind of had the realization all of a sudden. I was like, oh my goodness, we've never had to have a guy to call for that.
Yeah.
My grandpa just came to our house.
Yeah.
And if it was something particular that had to do with construction, he just did it. And he was just an easy asset that was sitting on the bench, willing to help and happy to do it, And so going to the point of being on my own and realizing, oh my goodness, I don't have that. Man, I wish I would have paid a little bit of more attention whenever he was making custom molding and developing blades to cut his own molding, build his own doors. Like I could fumble through it. It wouldn't look very good.
Yeah.
And to be honest, those are probably the most fun things. I really, really enjoy doing that stuff and doing the actual hands-on woodworking, the carpentry work. It's probably the thing I enjoy most about construction, and the thing I get to do least in construction.
Yeah.
Right? If I could grow my business like I want to grow it and be the one on the tools, I would do it.
Yeah. So you pretty much knew early on that construction was where you wanted to go, as it relates to the exposure that you got from your grandfather? Or was there a time, in high school and college where, you weren't really sure where you wanted to go and just kind of landed in construction?
Believe it or not, I told my dad when I was early in high school that I wanted to be a dentist.
You do have great teeth.
I take care of them, right? No, I told him I wanted to be a dentist, and he was like, oh, why? And I was like, oh, I think it'd be good. And he was like, well, that's great, man. My parents have always been super supportive. Like, whatever you choose, get after it, And my dad was like, that's awesome, man. You can do it. You should do it. And what it boiled down to is that we used to go to this really cool camp with one of my friends, and his dad was a dentist. And I was like, man, if he has this cool camp and he's a dentist, maybe I should just be a dentist.
Right.
And I could have this cool place to go hang out and go hunt and fish and be outside. And coming up on senior year of high school, I was like, Dad, I don't want to be a dentist. And he was like, no. And I was like, I do not want to be a dentist. He was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, construction. He was like, great, do construction. great, go for it. And so yeah, I selected construction, and I never changed from there.
Yeah, and I mean, what a blessing that LSU has, and probably at that time still had I mean, I think for the last 40 years, it's been a preeminent construction management program in the country.
A strong program, yeah.
Did you kind of know that going in, or you just kind of got there by default?
I knew it had a strong program going in. I was likely going to go to LSU regardless of the program. I just wasn't real focused on going try and find somewhere else to go to school, to be honest.
Yeah.
And there were no music scholarships in my future that I was going to follow, especially considering I didn't want to focus on music in college anyway. So I never really had a consideration otherwise. However, I was just I just benefited from the strong program that happened to be at the place I chose to go to.
Yes.
Right? So,
kind of serendipitous.
absolutely.
And so you get to college, you did the fraternity thing, right? The networking thing. I'm sure that internships were pretty important early on for you, but like, what did that experience look like for you in college?
So, funny enough, you mentioned the fraternity. Absolutely got to say that I'm probably the only person that used this method to select my fraternity, but I'm from Baton Rouge. Like, my Catholic high school is 5 minutes from fraternity row. You know, ton of exposure to a ton of folks in a whole bunch of different fraternities. And I would, go meet them and hang out with them, and had a great time at all of them. I was like, there's a lot of really good fraternities here, and I could see myself joining any of them. And when it ultimately came time to make the decision, I was like, to be honest, I can make friends with whoever, and all these guys seem real nice. I'm just going to pick the fraternity with the highest GPA. Those will probably be good guys to know later in life. That is literally how I picked my fraternity.
Same.
I was like, highest GPA is a great method. Let's just do that. And I do business with a ton of guys that I was in fraternities with. It just kind of worked out that way.
That's spot on. That's the same thing that I did. I didn't rush a fraternity until probably my second semester, or maybe it was my fourth. I can't even remember, but it was the same thing. I mean, they were the nerdy fraternity. They probably didn't have the best parties.
Yeah, we didn't have the best parties. That's all right.
That's all right. We do now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But early on, I mean, what's always struck me with you, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, I'm sure, is like your ability to make new relationships, meet new people, build your network. And so would you say you learned that in a fraternity, or did you kind of have that going in from your parents, like your people skills?
I've always been an outgoing person, always been a friendly person. I don't have trouble getting along with folks. But the fraternity aspect absolutely just exponentially grows your network, right?
Yeah.
And then it grows your network in the community, obviously, as an additional benefit. But the way I ended up moving through with internships and work, which is, I think, the original portion of your question, was my fraternity had like a pipeline to this building supply company. And it was like, hey, this building supply company does estimating and quantity takeoffs for various builders or developers that are doing neighborhoods where they'll have like, hey, here's the 4 floor plans. We need a floor plan 1, 2, 3, and 4 material takeoff, and we need you to break it up based on these delivery sequences, and these are the breakpoints of where we want those deliveries to separate. And so then we would go into scheduling their deliveries, and we would work hand in hand with them to make sure that they would have a seamless construction project, right? And try and be that service for them. Excuse me. And so the way it worked was the guy that had the job was like, hey, Nick, I got this job. Do you want to do it? And I was like, well, it's your job. And he's like, right, but I'm going to be moving on to work for a construction company in a year. And I have to give a year to train my replacement. And so he brought me in and trained me, and I would work in the hardware store, or I would do estimating and material scheduling for deliveries. And so did that, and then went to work for a residential builder, and the residential builder was a client of ours. So kind of just obvious segue, introduced to him. I had already hired my replacement and trained him. And actually we had hired that guy's replacement. So like left in good hands, right? And was going to work for a client. So they were happy because they know we're going to keep buying from them.
Yep.
Because I had a relationship. And so I went to work for that guy, and we were building high-end residential and doing, big outdoor kitchens that cost the same amount as starter homes, and doing large additions, remodels, new construction, just the whole gamut. And I hated it. And I enjoyed the construction, but the lack of structure in the residential market drove me nuts. It was very loose on paperwork. And so it was very easy to get into a scenario where the homeowner was like, well, that's not what I thought it was going to look like. It's like, well, we showed you what it was going to look like. And the biggest issue that I had was scheduling. And I was getting paid by the hour, but I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so when I look at something and it should take 3 months, and then it takes 7 because we've added XYZ, that's going to take a little bit more time, and we're going to get paid for it. But I'm looking at it from like a cash velocity perspective. And I'm like, we talk about this in our business all the time. It's, do you want to do $1 million job where you make 30%, but it's a 12-month job? Or do you want to do $1 million job where you make 10%, but you do it in 6 weeks? I know which one I'm picking. I want to move on and dedicate our resources elsewhere. So like the fact that it would be 8:30 in the morning and I would call the subcontractors that are the bottleneck on the project. And I'm like, where are you guys at? And they're like, we got hung up on this other job finishing something. We're not going to be there today. And there's like no repercussion.
Right.
And when you're dealing with residential, a lot of times you don't have these long schedules and you don't have a whole bunch of things going in at the same time. Well, that domino effect is massive.
Yeah.
And it really can drag out a residential project where I'm looking at it going, if they're paying me per hour, there's no way they're making money on these jobs.
Right.
And maybe they are, but I hated it. Didn't like anything about it. The only thing I liked about it was the guy I worked for. He was super nice. And I enjoyed working with him. But I knew I didn't want to do residential. And I got to the end of college, and, it was the post-2008 crash. There was nothing being built in Baton Rouge, like very little construction going on. And this is into 2010. And I was looking around for a job, and I could not get an interview. Nobody would interview me in the commercial world because I had like zero commercial experience from the actual construction contractor, actual builder side, only from the supply side. And so LaBerge was being built at the time. And so I went on to, I forgot what it's called. I think it's called Handshake now, but it's called Careers to Go at the time for LSU. And I went on to LSU's Careers to Go website, and they had the construction interviewing day. And I was like, all right, Manhattan Construction is building LaBerge Casino. Let's see if they went to construction interviewing day. They did. All right, let's see who they sent to construction interviewing day. And found the guys' names and reached out to, they had a massive field office. They had 50 offices in this job trailers compound that they had set up, and probably more. And I called the front desk at the job trailer, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for Tom. And they were like, well, Tom's in the Houston office. I'm like, okay, what about Lucas? And they were like, yeah, he's here. 1 second. I'm like, okay. And so he answers the phone. I'm like, hey, Lucas, this is Nick Miller. Tom mentioned that I should come by and talk to you about an interview for a project engineer position. He was like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, when do you want to come by? And I was like, when are you available? I was like, I'm actually open today. He was like, great, come on by. It's like, all right, cool. So I went and met with him that day, And I showed up with a copy of my resume, and I was like, "Hey, man, the resume you have, I think, is outdated. I've made some adjustments to it." He's like, "Oh, cool, thank you." And they hired me that afternoon. And a few months later, I developed a friendship with my now boss that had hired me. And I was like, "Man, did you know that I didn't have an interview with you?" And I just made all that up because I needed to get in the door. And he was like, "I did." And he was like, once I saw like how committed and aggressive you were, he's like, "I just had to hire you."
I love that story. I mean, you finessed your way into a job that would ultimately springboard your career, right?
Right. And we still talk. He comes in for one LSU football game a year, and we spend time together. He's a great dude, and we enjoyed the heck out of working together. And I got a ton of experience in a condensed amount of time.
At what point did he realize that you had finessed your way in? Before he offered you think?
He said halfway through the interview, he realized what was going on. And he was just like, "You know what? The person's hungry, and I like that."
That's amazing.
So I worked there for about a year, and then moved to Oklahoma with Manhattan, and went to work on a Native American casino building group. And that section of the company was building a handful of casinos for one particular tribe, and moved to Ponca City, Oklahoma, and massive town, man. So I think the population was like 10,000 before ConocoPhillips moved their headquarters out of town. And so there wasn't a ton going on in there in the Ponca City region, but we were building it was much smaller in LaBerge. It was like a $38 million casino, and another one just an hour east for the same tribe, about 38 million as well. Ground up, it was a casino and hotel with a small event center. And they were like 14-month schedules. So they were pretty aggressive. Mm-hmm. Achievable, but aggressive. And I would be lying if I said I didn't thoroughly enjoy it. It was the traveling casino work crew was a blast. It was like fed with a fire hose, learn a ton in a condensed amount of time. And great camaraderie because everybody's traveling. Yeah. Everybody's away from home. And if I wasn't more family focused, I mean, I already mentioned I grew up in a tight-knit family. Mm-hmm. We still do a lot together. And if I wasn't in that mindset and hadn't gotten engaged while I lived in Oklahoma, I may have not come back. Like I may have just kept traveling with them because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really did. And at the time, I was in my early 20s. It was me and the dog. We'll go wherever. Mm-hmm. We don't care. And so that was a great experience for me. Learned a ton. Learned a lot about orchestrating a large scale project. A lot of the do's and don'ts. A lot of the detail work that goes into the planning and preparation that people take for granted whenever they jump in and haven't been a part of those large scale projects. And there's a lot of ways that you have to work with certain trade partners and subcontractors and vendors in order to make sure that everybody is rowing the boat in the same direction. Yeah. Right, and get buy-in. And if you don't do those things and you allow things to get off track and don't course correct very quickly, then a project can really get away from you. Right. So learned a lot of valuable lessons on that trip.
And it sounds like, it's not so much X's and O's what really like sets you apart, right? I mean, of course, there's, the things that you learn in school and construction management and processes and things of that nature. But it sounds to me like in hearing your story, well, number one, you were willing to take a risk, like the risk of embarrassment of getting found out that like you showed up for an interview that wasn't scheduled. Right. The risk of moving away and leaving your family and all of the, things that, the comfort of being in your hometown, just the grit to, continue to work hard. And then also like the availability, like picking up and moving. Like that's a big sacrifice for a lot of people. And, you know, it kind of sounds like you reverse engineered that such that, I mean, some people want to start a family right when they get out of college. Right. And, you know, you dealt with a long-term relationship with your now wife, who's awesome. And, you know, it sounds like grit, availability, you know, your ability to be a leader or at least lead projects, all things that are really like soft skills that you really can't teach that. Right. Because I'm sitting here thinking like, you know, now, and we'll get into it in a minute, but like with Build, you know, you guys are doing everything that you said you would in a short amount of time. And in a market and an industry where there's a lot of big players that have, you know, a really strong vice grip on, you know, the local building economy. And yet you guys have been able to really, you know, posture your way in. Yeah. And I'm sitting here thinking like, what was it that set you apart? But it's really that, right? And it's your work ethic and your vision as a leader, and also your humility, right? Like I feel like a lot of times, new construction management graduates, you know, with the wrong personality will get into an environment where the trade guys don't trust them because, you know, they've got the college degree and they dress all fancy. And so, you know, you kind of mentioned like getting the trades on the same sheet of music, right? Of rowing in the same boat. Like what were some of the tactics or the lessons learned that you were like, man, I really accidentally handled that correctly. I'm gonna keep doing it that way.
Sure. So, all right, I'm glad you mentioned this because I had this conversation with an employee of ours that's going out to work on site on a project, and he said, you know, what advice would you give me? And this is like crucial advice. If it doesn't matter if you intend to be a project manager, the president of the company, it does not matter. If you don't know how to build a building, it doesn't matter at all. Like whatever your aspiration is, you may be the best leader on the planet, but if you don't know how to do what the core function of your business is, you will not be great at your business, at leading your business, right? And so the main thing that I would do is I do a lot of like mapping out what my day looks like. And I do it in the afternoon. Like the afternoon, I'll map out tomorrow, right? And I'll say, from this time to this time, I'm going to accomplish this. And I know, like, I'm a morning brain, right? And so I know that from, you know, 6:45 to 7:45, 8, I need to churn through these couple things just to get them humming and everything up and spinning. And then from 8 to 10, that is the core of when I'm going to get the most stuff done. We're in construction, so we start at 7, right? So I can churn through phone calls and catch-ups to make sure certain things are happening from during that 7 to 8 window. And then I need to block out time from 8 to 10 while my brain is fresh and I'm like my most productive, and I will just burn through work. And then when that next segment of my day hit, I would drop everything and get in the field. If the electricians are out running conduit, setting gear, whatever it is they're doing, I'd be walking around, shake hands with whoever. I'm introducing myself. I'm becoming friendly with these folks. And the main thing I'm doing is asking them, what are you doing? And they're like, well, we're doing this. Why are you doing it this way? And I would preface it like, I'm not questioning what you're doing. I'm trying to understand it because I have no idea about electrical or framing or setting steel or whatever it is they're doing, right? And you're showing them the humility of like, I'm not going to show up and tell you I'm a 23-year-old hotshot that knows more than you, because I'm not, right? This trade person may have been doing it longer than I'm alive. Most likely has. And so I want to show the humility that not only am I telling you I don't know, I'm expressing that I know you do know. So like, you know, I'm not going to say I'm like boosting their ego, but like I'm showing them that like, hey, I have some faith in the fact that you know what you're doing. And, you know, when you're dealing with, you know, the Manhattans of the world that were, you know, doing 30, 40, $50 million projects as like the floor of the smallest project they'll look at, you know, you're dealing with quality trade partners, right? So these guys know what they're doing. And so I would be walking around talking to those folks, figuring out what they're doing. And then when something crosses my desk from the design team, from the owner, or even from their own office that I can't figure out or answer, be like, hey, Kevin, come here. Check this out. And they'd map it out for me on the marker board, help me answer it. Like, they're your biggest asset because you've shown them, hey, I respect your knowledge. I respect your capability, and I want to learn from you. And I'm showing you I don't know, but I'm willing to know, and I want to know, and I have the passion for learning. And then they turn around and they reciprocate that, right? And so, developing those skills, you can get people to do a whole lot more if you've developed a rapport with them, right? So, I mean, that's just a basic human thing. We want to connect with each other first.
Yeah.
Before you start asking for something.
Right. So it's safe to say then that if I'm understanding it correctly, like a lot of young project managers kind of let their ego get in the way.
Yeah. I would say, it's a litany of things. It could be ego. Some people just have the fear of showing up and admitting that they don't know anything. We don't expect you to.
Yeah.
You haven't seen it.
Right.
How would you? And so, having that ability to recognize, like, I'm ahead of my skis here. And, I see a ton of them hide behind a computer monitor, not willing to make a phone call. They want to text, not call. They want to email, not text. And, they want to avoid it at all costs. But like, that human interaction is real important. Yes. It's a lot easier for me to detect your tone if I'm talking to you on the phone than it is whenever you shoot me an email and demand something.
Right.
If I can call you and say, hey, I need this, and this is why. And they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll do that for you. Whereas you send it to them in an email and they're like, chill.
Yeah.
What are you, don't make that demand to me. What are you doing with it? And now all of a sudden we're adversarial.
Yes. Yeah. It's something that I learned, really once I became a business owner, but even, more recently through our mutual friend, Matthew Laborde, and just like the Matthew's the owner of Elephant, and obviously talking on phones is so big in their market and really any market. I mean, talking on the phone is really a true skill.
It is.
And dialing somebody who you don't know and dealing with that awkwardness of like a little bit of small talk on the beginning. And then, when do I jump into the meat of the conversation? And I think he does a great job on the phone. It's something that if you can master it from as a personal skill and development, I think it goes a long way. Yeah, and so for you, is it something that you've gotten better at over time? And like the fear of calling somebody and hoping that they answer, and then having to deal with leaving a voicemail. Like I can remember getting so nervous about, dang, what do I say? Like how in depth do I go on this voicemail? Like that, but is that a skill that you continue to hone for yourself and then also for your team? Yeah, absolutely. The phone side. And I do think it's something that I'm continuously getting better at. I almost feel like I'm getting worse at the face-to-face interaction in the field of the actual construction projects because I know too much now. And so, I walk on the job site and everybody's like, what's wrong with that guy? He's got a scowl on his face. He looks angry. It's like, no, I'm not angry. I'm just looking around thinking that's a problem. I don't like that. That's poor. And most of the time it's internal. It's like, oh, we got to do a better job of cleaning up the job site or like whatever it is. Right. But I'm looking at so many different things than whenever, brand new, not a whole lot of responsibility. Nick was out walking the job site. There was no stress or worry in my mind. I was just out there learning, having a great time. Couldn't have been happier to be making $55,000 a year. I thought I was on the moon, man. This is awesome. And so, now that I'm like, I know all the things that can go wrong, I look at it from a completely different lens. And, I have to always remind myself, people that will recognize each other on a job site or whatever, whether it be a trim carpenter or a sheetrock guy or whatever. And
we'll make eye contact, and I gotta remember, like, soften your smile here, you know, you gotta be friendly to make friends. And that's what I tell my kids all the time. Like, hey, we gotta be friendly to make friends, Nick. You know, let's remember that we can smile and interact with everybody, and you know, you don't have to just look at it through the lens of what's wrong here.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, in that regard, I think I got worse at it, but you know, I'm cognizant of it. So I pay attention to it and I try and correct it. Right.
Yeah. That's so good. So you wrap up the big casino projects, traveling projects. In the meantime, you get engaged,
Right.
And then pick us up where that left off.
Sure. So I wanted my wife now, who I was engaged to. I wanted her to come with me and travel. And she was graduating from grad school. She's a speech therapist by trade. And she was like, well, where do I apply for a job? And I was like, it's a good question. Let me ask. So I was like, hey, where's my next project? And they were like, well, we're either going to go to Tulsa and build this large community park. And it was like $100 million park or something. It's like, we're going to go build this in Tulsa. Or you're going to go to rebuild Kyle Field at Texas A&M. And I was like, okay. So those are like 10 hours apart from each other. And they were like, yeah. I was like, so what do I tell her? And they were like, I don't know, bud. It's like, okay. All right. And so I told her exactly what they told me. There was no polish or presentation on that delivery. It was just, this is what they said. And she was like, well, what do I do? Where do I apply for jobs? I was like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, well, look, you know, they were paying us travel money on top of our salary and like putting us up and feeding us, and like they were taking great care of us. And I was like, I mean, I'm making so much money. Who cares? Like, why don't you just come on the road with me? And she was like, and do what? It's like, nothing, just hang out. She was like, I'm not going to know anybody there. I'm just going to be alone, like sitting in this rental. Like, I don't want to do that. And I was like, all right, we'll just get a job at Starbucks or something. And she was like, I'm not taking a master's degree to Starbucks.
Yeah.
You've lost your mind. This is not a long-term solution. And I was like, she's right. And like right about that time, I got a phone call about a job offer in Baton Rouge. And you know, I mean, we always wanted to land back in Baton Rouge anyway, so it just kind of was a right call, you know, right timing thing. And, and we took the opportunity to come back home, and she got the opportunity to know where to apply for a job.
Yep.
So everybody
Win-win.
wins. Yeah. And so came back to Baton Rouge to work for Lincoln Builders, and they needed a project manager to focus on some large medical and education projects that they had coming up. And so I jumped in with a hospital project with Lincoln Builders and did some education projects with them, and stayed there for a good long while until I started Build. So I was with them 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you know, the timing of Build is really interesting to me, and the genesis of it. So can you kind of talk me through those months or maybe a year leading up to you making that leap, and you know, where the economy was at the time? You know, I think it was in the middle of COVID, like, or around COVID. Like, take us through the genesis of Build.
Sure. So obviously, given background, the environment with my family, like I knew at some point that I wanted to have my own business, right? I didn't know if that was going to be primary business, something on the side, something real estate related. I was always doing something real estate related to kind of scratch the itch, but like I didn't know what it was. And I'd been feeling it more and more that like I wanted to do it, and my wife and I had been talking about it more and more, but it was always kind of a thing that was like, you know, on the horizon. At some point in the future, when we cross whatever arbitrary milestone I had developed at the time, like that's the point that we'll take the leap. And we kept talking about it like this far off time. And I kind of had a sit down with a friend of mine. This was not intended to be an intense conversation. And he was just like, man, you know, if you just turn up dead tomorrow, they'll have you replaced in a week. And I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, it's not a knock on them, but like the machine has to keep rolling, baby. And I was like, I mean, I guess you're right. And he's like, so why don't you make your own machine? And I was like, well, I mean, I like working for them. He's like, it's not about liking or them taking care of you. And it's not about any of that. It's just like, I think you're overthinking this. And I was like, well, I mean, because I guess backing up, like that wasn't just like a left field comment. I told him like, yeah, at some point I'll think about starting my own. He's like, why not right now?
Yeah.
And they'll replace you tomorrow if they need to. I'm like, well, yeah, they should. They're a business and they can't quit serving their clients because Nick doesn't work there anymore.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, no, why don't you go build your own one of those? And I was like, well, I mean, you know, this is April of 2020. Stay at home order was like 2 weeks prior.
Right.
And my wife was pregnant with our second and was like, well, you know, I have a mortgage. I got a kid on the way. I got bills for this, and this. And he was like, I hear you. So does everybody else.
Yeah.
You're not special. I was like, that's a good point. He's like, just figure it out. Like, there's a lot of people out there. And he was like, I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of people that aren't that smart. They figure it out just fine. I think you can figure it out. And I was like, okay, he's got a good point. And I kind of like left and I was sitting in my car about to drive home. And I was just like, sat there for like 10 minutes. I was like, man, he's right. Like I'm creating all these arbitrary milestones and like, I'm just going to find another reason not to.
Yeah.
I just feel like I just got to go for it. And so I went home and I was like, I told Danielle, I was like, I got to talk to you about something. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I think I want to quit my job. She was like, oh, right now? And I was like, yeah, I think right now. And she was like, well, do you want to like think about it? I was like, I think I kind of made my mind up. And, oh, man, I got to back up and tell you one more thing that happened while I was sitting in the car thinking about it. I called Matt Laborde and I was like, I think I'm going to quit my job. And he was like, yeah, do it. Do it, man. And I was like, I think it's like the worst time to start a construction company with the stay-at-home order and like what's going to happen with COVID. I think it's the worst time to do it. And he was like, or the best. He was like, you don't know. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, you don't have a crystal ball. It could be the best time. And you don't want to look back and be like, man, I wish I would have done it. And I was like, yeah, it's a good point. And so I was like, you're right. I'm going to do it. And so that's whenever I went home and told her. And I was like, well, Matt said it could be the best time. And she was like, well, is Matt going to pay our bills? Or like, what are we doing there? And I was like, well, that's a good point. And so, yeah, I decided to do it. And in June, I put in my notice and started my company.
And so did you have anything lined up? I mean, did you have some prospect jobs or maybe some friends who, you know, needed some things on the side that, you know, kind of kept you busy early on? Or did you just kind of start like carte blanche?
I had nothing. I had unbridled enthusiasm, you know, I don't know, nothing. And,
well, you had a badass wife, that's for sure.
Yeah. And hey, I'll say that, you know, my uncle, who I talk to a lot about business and he checks in on me a lot, he was like, hey man, you know, you and your spouse have to be lockstep.
Yep.
Like, and he was like, I don't mean like, she's like, yeah, I would love if you had a successful business. He's like, you need to be very, very clear that it is not going to be fun for a while. Mm-hmm. And that it's going to be super challenging. And if she is not on the same page as you, like you need to know that right now. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, I agree. So like, I was super honest about the fact that like, we may be in a tough spot. Like we may be super tight financially and, you know, we both had good jobs and like, we hadn't really had to worry about whether or not we could pay for stuff or we never really had to hold back on doing something fun because we needed to save the money. I mean, you know, we had typical struggles of a, you know, new couple who, I mean, we bought our first house and sat on a picnic blanket for a couple months till we bought a couch. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that's pretty standard, you know? I mean, we were perfectly happy. And so I did have that direct conversation with her, and she has been an immense supporter. And she has never wavered from that support and been just a rock star of a mom and a rock star of a partner along the way. And so I think that's probably the biggest blessing along the way is that I have that rock that is like in step with me, but like I'm lucky enough to have that across the board with a ton of family and friends, you know, and that's just invaluable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if like Warren Buffett said it or what, influencers said it, but the most important decision that we can make as business owners is our spouse, right?
Yeah.
And, it's really been the same for me. It's so interesting to hear like the triangle of, me, you, and Matthew Laborde, because, whoever follows the news these days can see that Elephant kind of went through this transformation this year.
Yeah.
And I know that you and I both advised him through that.
Yeah.
And yet that, Build becomes one of Attract's first clients. Like it's really kind of poetic how it's so interchanged. And then even for us, I mean, COVID was when I got the idea to start Attract. And I didn't make the move until, probably December of 2021. So I was a year and a half behind you.
Yep.
And we first started working together probably in the fall of 21, like before Attract was even like officially a thing.
Yeah.
And, but it was such a pivotal time for us as young husbands and young fathers and then young entrepreneurs as well.
No doubt.
Right. So take me through then. Okay. So you start carte blanche, you have nothing but some awesome foundational relationships and support, and, move through really that first year of Build. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. We were incredibly well received. We lost money our first month and never again. Which, think about that from a business perspective alone, that's pretty wild, right? And then if you consider the time it takes for a deal cycle in construction, it's really incredible. Because I'm not going to get into the nuances of what a deal cycle looks like in construction for the various delivery types, but what I will say is just think about it on the surface. John Smith wants to build a building or renovate or whatever. Well, they get introduced to us and we talk about budgeting for a month. Well, then we got to draw it and confirm that budget. And then we got to get a permit so that we could start. Then we actually have to start. Then we have to perform. Then we have to bill. Then we have to get paid. So the fact that we were making money and bringing in cash and sustaining ourselves, 30 to 60 days after we opened the doors is pretty impressive. Just that it worked out that way. I won't say that it's like Nick's skill that did anything, but I would say that it's an incredible network of clients that, saw us going out on our own, believed in us, put faith in us. And, there's a lot of fly-by-night contractors. So I don't take the fact that people took a risk on us lightly.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of the folks that jumped out there and hired us to, in many cases perform projects that were too big for what we were at the time.
Yeah.
So we, taking you through the early stages, like I said, we picked up work very, very quickly. It was just me and my mom. We were the only employees. And then we had one hourly guy that had gone back to school and was looking for some construction experience and had none. And we hired him, and we were a couple months in business, 3 or 4 months in business. And I was like 6 p.m. at a job site, pushing a broom, trying to clean something up because I have folks coming the next day. And like big thing for me is like job site cleanliness. the next guy that shows up is not going to pick up after himself if it looks like a wreck. And I went to check on some work, and the guys that had left, who weren't coming back the next day, had left a little bit of a mess. And I was like, I got to clean this up. And I'm like pushing a push broom around this building at 6 o'clock in the evening. And my 2-year-old's with me because we didn't have another option for him to go somewhere. So he's with me, and he is smacking a wall with a plastic hammer. And I'm like, there has got to be a better way than this. This is not going to be sustainable, and I cannot grow a business like this. And I was like, we got to hire some people, like ASAP, got to hire some people. And so we were already gaining work. We were already picking up jobs. We were already getting a ton of leads in the pipeline. And we were already at 3 months, we were already at a point where if I don't hire somebody, like I got to turn work away because I can't do all this work alone. And I definitely can't do it to the standard that I would like to put my name on. So, we hired Eric, our general superintendent, who I had worked with in the past. And he brought an incredible amount of experience from the field perspective specifically. But he's got a well-rounded knowledge because he has been a project manager as well. And I was like, look, if we're going to keep performing on the office side, somebody has to focus on the field side. And so we need to start dividing up responsibilities. So I brought him in, and then it's been slowly just bolting on. The reality is bolting on the next piece that eliminates bottlenecks, right? So we, brought on project managers. We brought on Jeremy, our VP of Pre-Con, because I got to a point where I was like, if I could estimate more, we could do more work. But I am just one man, and I am running out of daylight, and I cannot estimate fast enough. And so brought on Jeremy, and we've just added so many strong pieces to the puzzle that have given us such a leg up. And what I like to tell people all the time is I feel like I built the business backwards from what most people think whenever they say they're starting a company or doing XYZ. Is like, I built the leadership team first. I built the most expensive, top-heavy, small construction company in town.
Yeah.
And I did it that way on purpose because I knew that having horsepower would afford us so many more opportunities in the future. And like, it's going to hurt a little bit on the front end. We're going to forfeit some margin, right? Because we're going to be paying the equivalent of what those folks are worth, right? They've earned that. They have the skins on the wall to require them to be worth that dollar figure. And so, the last leadership team piece to that puzzle was bringing on Stephen Romero, who's now my partner in the business, but bringing him on a year ago, or almost a year ago. And every single time that I take that leap of faith and I'm like terrified to hire somebody that I'm like, I don't know if can we even afford to spend this money? Like every time I take that leap of faith, I feel like they pay for themselves instantly. I don't know a better way to say it. It's just like they find some inefficiency. They add some value. They bring XYZ project just through their network that just falls in their lap, or like in some way, shape, or form, that person pays for themselves in multiples just instantly. And it goes to show you, like one piece of advice I got from my uncle was like, he told me, the time to hire quality talent and add them to your bench is the second you realize they're available. It doesn't matter if you have something for them to work on. And then once you add that bench depth, once you add that talent to your bench, it's the leadership team's responsibility to figure out how to put them to work. Yeah. And he was like, that's what the leadership team works on. Leadership team, we're not in there dreaming up the next idea. No, we're figuring out how to add bench depth and talented bench depth, and then we're figuring out how to put those folks to work. Yeah. In the best manner possible.
And it's such a timely conversation because the same thing in our business, in our firm, that you really sacrifice margin and profitability in the early years, right? Of building that bench. I mean, I can think, we call it the dog days of summer of, the summer of 2024, where we just hired like some really badass talent that we didn't have the work for yet.
Yeah.
And to your point, we figured it out. Like the work came, but everybody thinks that like it's all sunshine and rainbows when you start a business, and it's not, because you have to manage the machine that is the execution machine versus the marketing and sales machine, the deal machine. And we had the execution, but we just didn't have the deal machine. And I think we're very top heavy for some time, and it took a big sacrifice for Armin and I as owners, to take haircuts and to, kind of take more leaps of faith to make that hire without having the work.
Yeah.
And, for us, it's the same way. We want to build that bench. If they're available, we're going to hire you. We just got to find a way to figure it out. And I mean, when we first started working together, I think you had, 3 or 4 employees. I think through the years, I think you've gotten, a lot of compliments on maybe the sophistication of your job costing, or of how things are, able to be presented, and, working through your bonding relationships and things of that nature. I mean, you knew early on the importance of your financials and of key performance indicators and things of that nature. Is that something that you kind of picked up along the way from Lincoln and Manhattan and, stops before then?
Yeah. It was something that I was very fortunate to have a lot of exposure to, where a lot of folks that were, probably my age at the time didn't necessarily get. I seem to have found myself at various stops in my career being the youngest one in the room, right? And taking that very humble approach to like, hey, I'm going to be the biggest sponge in this building, and I want to know everything. And I want to know it just because I'm interested, right? So I paid attention a lot to the financials. And I think and I still battle this, is like, I know something is a problem, but I may not know how to articulate it to you. And I had this conversation with you like a couple months ago, where I called you and I was like, the business is doing good, John. Everything's good, but our cash is like trending downward. And again, I know everything's fine, but I'm having trouble figuring out the trend here, what's driving it. And I think I know, and I'll give you my tidbits, but I just need you to prove it on paper with me and show me that I'm not nuts. And that way I can articulate it to the team and make sure they understand ramifications of making XYZ decisions. Right. And so I think that I had a pretty good idea of what I was trying to understand whenever I set out on my own, but that came with years of looking at sophisticated financials in a really expensive construction accounting software at Lincoln Builders, because, I was the senior PM, I was running the project management portion of the company, and, I was in charge of submitting everyone's projections for their projects every month. And so I was looking through their projections, and, it was my job to look at them and be the first line of defense to call BS. Like, hey, this is not accurate, and this is why. And so I had to take a lot of time to figure out what the financials meant. And then I would say that was one of our biggest struggles starting out in business, was like, I think we were your first client, y'all's first client or thereabout. Right?
Yeah.
And the reason we jumped over was because we had already had 2 different groups work on our books, and both of them said, we have construction experience. And I told both of them, like, I will know very quickly if you don't, because construction accounting is unique, and it's unique in a lot of ways. Like, job costing is super, super critical, because I have to know if I'm on budget, and I'm not going to do it in an Excel spreadsheet. I can, and I'll do it as a, systematic redundancy portion, but I need your information and my information to reconcile. I need it to jive, and I need to be able to utilize that to forecast how I'm going to do on a job so that I know how to tell the bonding agents and I need to know how to tell the surety how we're doing. I need to know what we're going to do for taxes. I'm going to need to know if we can hire somebody else. Like there's a lot of decisions that need to be made on a projection at month 1 of a 12-month job. Right. And I need to be able to do all those things. And if you don't give me accurate construction accounting, I cannot do my job. Right. And so we ended up going through 2 separate firms. And then, you know, I have a personal relationship with Armin through my brother. And he was like, hey, I was talking to Armin. He mentioned Attract, and Armin has job cost accounting experience. And I was like, perfect. We're going to talk to him. And so that's whenever Armin introduced us, and it's been incredibly beneficial. Right. And, you know, I know this isn't an Attract commercial, but I'm going to brag on y'all a little bit and say that I've told y'all this before, but our bonding agent tells me you get more bonding because your financials look so good. And that's not just like we're making a bunch of money. That's like they're organized, they're accurate, right? And they deliver them in a package, meaning Attract, delivers our financials in a package that gives our bonding company, our surety, confidence in the financials, right? And so the other thing is there's a ton of stuff behind the scenes that takes place in those financials, right? You know, whether it be you, Christy, Armin, anybody from y'all's team calling and saying, hey, we're about to close the books on December. This looks atypical. Can you tell me if it's accurate, or did something get miscoded? Like, is it something as simple as that? And we'll dive into that. Like, we very rarely revise them because we're able to have that back and forth collaboration to say, no, you're right. That's a miss. It got coded to the wrong job or something simple, right? And most of the time she knows the answer. Whenever Christy calls me, she usually knows the answer to her own question. She says, this is what I think happened. Tell me I'm right, and we'll fix it, but I don't want to do it without asking. And so, you know, having accurate construction accounting is so crucial. And so, you know, I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but it's important because once I have that, now I can, you know, distribute that information to the rest of the team. And more importantly, I can utilize accurate information to train the next level that may not have gotten that exposure yet. And if I don't, like I said, I had the luxury of this, you know, super expensive 6-figure a year accounting software. I don't have the luxury of that anymore, and I can't afford it. So I got to work with what I got, and I need to make it look as similar to that as possible and make it be something that I can digest and translate to the next group, right? So I need to give them as close to the experience I got to give them the best opportunity to understand it.
So good. Well, I appreciate the shout out. I wasn't, you know, that's really good. Yeah. So another thing that I feel like our friendship and relationship over the years has been, ultimately, I look to you as being a year and a half ahead of us. And, you know, I can remember conversations that we've had of like, man, when is the startup mode going to end? Yeah. Like at what higher or at what point of like firepower on my team will I start to feel like I'm not worried about whether I could, you know, keep the company open tomorrow, right? And I think for you, you know, it was somewhere around year 3 or 4, and it might have been like one big hire. But for our listeners out there who are like kind of in the startup phase of their company, like, is there something that was like a break point for you, a tipping point?
You know, I think that the confidence builder comes with time, right? In that when I started the company, I thought that the sales side and like getting the work would be so much more difficult than it is. And so I was just laser focused on like, who's the next prospect? Who do I need to be talking to? What's the next opportunity? Who can I call on? And I was just laser focused on that. And then what I figured out very quickly was, yes, that is super important. And you have to focus effort on that. But like we have a pipeline, we have a system, and that it doesn't run itself, but I need to remember to focus on the implementation side and make sure that we're executing. You know, like you said earlier, like have the horsepower and know that you can execute, because you'll get the call once, but if you fall on your face, you're not going to get the second call probably. Right. And so, you know, working through that was like a huge learning curve for me. And we lacked a lot of confidence in our ability to execute across a ton of jobs. And so once I felt like, you know, we're executing at a high enough level where we can have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 jobs running at once, and I wake up in the morning and I know all those 10 jobs are running, and they're tracking, and they have KPIs. They have all these metrics that we're running alongside to make sure that, you know, the train stays on the tracks. Like once those things were all clicking along, like that's where I finally felt like, okay, now we have an operating business.
Yeah.
But, you know, to just kind of, you know, look at the flip side of that, that's a double-edged sword, because just because you're not in the startup phase doesn't mean you still don't have problems. Right. You have the exact same amount of problems. They're just way bigger. Yeah. You know, and you got to be nimble. You got to be creative. You got to be able to adapt. And, you know, you're just dealing with a different variety of problems rather than the startup phase. But yeah, I would say somewhere around the 3-year mark where we finally leveled out, felt like we had a lot of work going on, felt like everybody was kind of knew what their role was, what they were supposed to be working on. And then from there, like from that point to now, we have just been honing processes and getting laser focused on making sure that we define what each one of those roles looks like and what success looks like. And, you know, I was always nervous about that with our staff. I was nervous about processing something to death. You know, I never want somebody to be like, oh my gosh, another form from the office that I got to fill out or I got to look at. And what I found is like, those folks wanted that direction. Yeah. Like they appreciate the clarity, and they appreciate the clarity because you're telling them why, but they appreciate the clarity of process. So that, okay, well, I know how to succeed if I know exactly how you want something done. Right.
Yeah. Most people want to be led because they want to win, and being led gives them more tools to win. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so let's talk about Build today, right? I mean, you guys have a new headquarters. Your team's continuing to grow. You mentioned the addition of a partner with Steven. Kind of give us the lay of the land with Build. Who's your ideal customer? What are you doing today?
Sure. So Steven comes on board, brings a little bit of a different variety of background from me, right? He's got a ton of hands-on experience, but he's an architect by education. Okay, that's where he started his career, was on the architecture side. But he dealt with a ton of CA, contract administration, which means he was going out and doing the field inspections, progress checks for the architecture firm, and making sure quality, adherence to contract, all those things were taking place, right? So he brings a little bit of a different perspective that is enormously valuable, because, you know, and I'm telling you all this because it's important to my answer, but he brings the perspective of he's represented the client. Yeah. We've rarely represent the client, you know, in that regard, in the regard that he's looking at. I mean, we're all representing the client because we want everybody that's putting stuff in to put it in the way the client wants, right? But he has a little bit of a different lens. And so having that perspective has been super, super helpful, because we can lean on and be like, you know, what's the owner going to be concerned about here? So that when I talk to him about it, I can present him with a solution that's valuable to them. You know, then to, you know, John or Susie client needs to see it from their perspective and know that we've thought about this. And, you know, we, like, one of our core values is being resolute. Like, we want to bring a solution to you. We want to tell you, yes, there's a problem. Here's the solutions that we see, and this is why. And we're gonna talk it out and figure out what's best for you, right? So, you know, I say all that to say, you know, who is Build? What is our ideal client? So, we envision ourselves as a partner to developer, and the partnership is we try and add a level of value that meets or exceeds the level that you're trying to bring on. So let's say John's never developed before and you need somebody to be in your hip pocket because you're nervous. We'll be in your hip pocket. Like I will be as involved in that process as you want me to be involved in that process. Or let's say, oh man, John does 15 developments a year. He just needs somebody to touch point him at these intervals, give him progress updates, and give him a login to your software so you can see the dashboard and make sure things are happening, and set it and forget it. That's what we want, right? And so we have the ability to custom tailor those approaches to the clients because we have such a top heavy experience level, right? For the size organization we are. And so what we talk about a lot internally is, we're basically like a freight liner, but we have the agility of a speedboat. Like we have the horsepower, but we're agile.
Yes.
And we have a personal touch because we have Steven and I are involved personally, boots on the ground on every project we have, right? We have our cell phone numbers are given out to everybody, whether it be a subcontractor, whether it be a vendor of that subcontractor, or whether it be the client, the design team, whatever. And there's a lot more of a personal approach than you're going to get with most organizations that are doing the size projects that we're doing. Going and, as far as what type of work we're doing, going back to my roots, I would love to tell you that I set out to start a historic tax credit focused business. I did not. But I have a bunch of historic experience through my grandfather, right? And so, we started doing historic projects in early 2022, late 2021, and we've had an active historic tax credit type project going on continuously since that point. We just went to a ribbon cutting for one yesterday at the Caballero United Way. So downtown, which is a fascinating building, the old public library. And we kicked off 2 in Shreveport between December and January. So those projects are historic tax credit. That's not the only type of work we do. We do a lot of medical work. We do a lot. The stuff that we like to do is things where we can add value. We want to add value in our ability to custom tailor a project for an owner to give them the desired result, right? So what we like to do is be involved as early as possible so we can give front end advice on how to hit their goals and their budgets. We're super data driven. So we have a lot of historic data that we can, pump out and show you, hey, if you do this, this, and this is what it's going to do to your pricing. This is what it's going to do to your finished product, right? And so what we're utilizing that for is we're doing the 2 historic tax credit projects, which are historic rehabs of an old school building and an old federal bank building, turning them into seniors housing multifamily. And those are the projects in Shreveport. We're doing a lot of high-end commercial retail type stuff, and a lot of multifamily new and multifamily rehab of the newer variety as well. So we're kind of spread out. We still, early on we did a lot of wetland mitigation banks. We're still doing those, and we like doing those. Those are kind of a passion project for me, because we have some family connections to the wetland mitigation world. And so we do a little bit of that as well. So, I'm kind of spreading you all out here, but, the focus for us is mainly trying to get in early with the client so that we can help them drive the ship in the direction that it needs to hit their value proposition.
Excellent. So kind of as we wrap up here, I want to end this conversation really where we began, and it's, really tied in with your grandfather, right?
Yeah.
And, so Nick and I are both board members on the Alzheimer's Services of the Capital Area Board, which to me is probably the top nonprofit around. I mean, I'm biased, but I think with the executive director, Barbara Altan, and the staff and just the firepower of amazing board members that they've had, currently and also historically. I know as one of the younger board members, it's just an amazing opportunity for me to learn, kind of like you said, as through your career. Matthew Laborde was able to get, a referral for me to be on there, and I think maybe the same for you. But, you kind of touched on the fact that your grandfather, towards the end of his life, really suffered from Alzheimer's. And so can you talk about, your involvement in that board? I know that Build has, been a big supporter of their facilities, and you've worked on some projects for that organization. But can you maybe talk a little bit about your time on that board and what Build is doing in the community through that organization?
Yeah. So I've been helping out with Alzheimer's Services, the Walk to Remember, since 2016 or so. And it literally started with Matthew calling me and saying, "Hey, do you have a trailer?" And I was like, "I have a trailer." And he's like, "Are you busy?" And I was like, "No, I'm not this afternoon. If you can give me a few hours to finish something up." He's like, "Perfect. I need help getting some stuff loaded up for Alzheimer's Services." So I'm like, "Oh yeah, happy to help," And then it turned into delivering all the signs for the race day. And then next year they called and they're like, "Hey, you good to do the signs again?" I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." And so it was just, "Yeah, I'd be happy to help." So I did it for years, and then they asked me to join the board, right? It's, obviously a passion project. It hits close to home for me. It's Alzheimer's has impacted a lot of members of our family, and it's a terrible, terrible disease to watch in real time. And so heart goes out to anybody who's a caregiver and struggling through that in real time, because it is a super, super, super taxing thing from an emotional side and just a physical side. The things that you battle with that you don't even think about are like, my grandpa would get confused on day and night. So my grandma, she had help during the day, but he was awake all night, and he was an escape artist, and he was strong as an ox up until his very last days. And he was also, he was, dealing with the cognitive effects, but he's still a master carpenter. So he would get out of any contraption you could put on, and he would find tools and find a way to make those tools get rid of whatever lock and contraption you put on to keep him contained. And so, my involvement started as just an ask for help to load some stuff. And I was like, "Oh, I'm happy to help." And then I've just been super, super impressed from day one with the entire organization. And, their advocacy for the caregivers and their focus on providing knowledge and resources for people that are going through that phase or that portion of life that is so challenging is super, super impressive. And I can't say enough good things about the organization. And so I kind of was just hooked. The more and more I got behind the curtain, I was like, man, this is something I can get excited about helping out with. And they've been great to me. And I look forward to helping them for many years. But, like you said, Miss Barbara is a rock star. If you forget about the nature of the organization and you just say, let's call this a for-profit company, and she's the CEO. It's easy to say that's a rock star,
yes,
right? Because she wakes up and is passionate about Alzheimer's Services of Baton Rouge,
yep,
of the capital area, and she leaves work in the afternoon, and if there's an event and she ends up at that event, she will be an advocate for that group. She is 100% of the time passionate about it,
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time. And that is so, so difficult to find, you know? So I hope that, when she decides to retire, that the momentum continues. They have a very, very talented and passionate staff. And so I feel like they're going to be in great hands. But she's one of a kind. Going to be very difficult to replace for sure.
No doubt. And so, shameless plug for the Capital Alzheimer's services of the Capital area. We've got our walk every October, and we have our memories luncheon every May. So if you are a listener here, maybe you'll get an invite. We'll hope you'll join us. But really, Nick, as we close, I just want to honor you and the work that you and your company and your staff and your team have been able to do. It's really fun to be a part of. It's excellent it's amazing to see the excellence that you exude in your organization, and the results pay off, right? And the proof is in the pudding, really. And so, I really appreciate you coming on, for, trusting Attract, and, I'm excited to continue to grow together.
Absolutely. Appreciate it so much. The partnership's been incredible, and look for many more years of positive growth and trajectory, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode of Kickin' Assets.